There is a small organ tucked deep within the human brain, no larger than a grain of rice. For most, it exists as an anatomical footnote, the pineal gland. But this unassuming gland has, across countless civilizations and philosophical traditions, been given a weight far greater than its size suggests. Why is that? Why has something so biologically simple been connected to ideas of spiritual awakening, universal consciousness, and even the so-called third eye? From a purely biological standpoint, the pineal gland's function is tied to regulating melatonin production, helping govern circadian rhythms, the natural sleep-wake cycle that keeps human physiology in sync with the rotation of the planet. This is established science. French philosopher and scientist René Descartes once called the pineal gland the seat of the soul, which might sound poetic but was grounded in his observations about its singularity. Unlike other brain structures mirrored across both hemispheres, the pineal gland stands alone right at the center. But the question is, how did people thousands of years before Descartes arrive at similar reverence? How did ancient Indian texts speak of the Ajna chakra, or the third eye, which they placed directly in the center of the forehead, corresponding almost exactly to where modern science locates the pineal gland? To understand this, we need to acknowledge two parallel histories, one biological, one metaphysical. Biologically, the pineal gland is photoreceptive. It responds to light. This isn't just metaphorical. In lower vertebrates like reptiles and amphibians, it is quite literally a photosensitive organ, functioning as a type of internal eye. Scientists call this the parietal eye or third eye in animals such as the tuatara, a lizard native to New Zealand. That third eye is physically visible as a light-sensitive organ connected to the pineal complex. While in humans it no longer serves this external function, the remnants remain in its structure and role in sensing environmental light cues. Now, parallel to that, in ancient texts, be it the Upanishads, Taoist writings, or esoteric Hermetic philosophies from Egypt, there appears an awareness of this inner sensory faculty. The third eye, or inner vision, was not just a poetic phrase. These traditions described it as an actual center of perception that transcended physical sight. When early yogic practitioners spoke of the Ajna chakra, for example, they weren't describing a literal eye, but rather a center of consciousness. And remarkably, modern neuroanatomy places this metaphorical third eye exactly where the pineal gland resides. This convergence is not easily dismissed. It suggests that ancient observers, through practices like meditation and deep inner focus, became aware of faculties that modern science only now is beginning to measure indirectly, such as neuroelectric changes in the brain, altered states of consciousness, and the brain's response to things like flickering light or rhythmic sound, which directly stimulate regions, including the pineal. Where things get even more curious is the pineal gland's role in relation to substances like DMT, dimethyltryptamine. DMT is a powerful psychedelic compound found in many plants and animals, and some researchers, notably Dr. Rick Strassman, have hypothesized that the pineal gland could produce it endogenously. Though scientific evidence is not yet conclusive, rodent studies have identified trace DMT production in the pineal region. Ancient cultures didn't use the term DMT, of course, but many described vivid visionary experiences linked with activating the third eye. Intense colors, sounds, feelings of oneness. The Vedic tradition speaks of samadhi, a state of unity consciousness, described in ways uncannily similar to modern reports from DMT experiences. Could it be that certain breathing techniques, rituals, or even states of meditation stimulated endogenous substances like DMT within the brain's own structures? These are not merely speculative ideas. Neuroscientific studies show that deep meditation affects gamma wave frequencies in the brain, measurable, objective changes in brain activity that correlate with heightened awareness and altered perception. And guess what part of the brain responds to such shifts? Regions tied to the limbic system, thalamus, and yes, potentially the pineal gland. The idea then that this gland might serve as more than a melatonin regulator isn't pseudoscience. It's a hypothesis that stands at the intersection of neuroscience and metaphysical tradition. And across cultures, from the Egyptian Eye of Horus to Taoist alchemical practices aimed at cultivating elixir fields in the head, the theme repeats. The human organism has within it a center of perception beyond the physical, all often theorized to symbolically represent the pineal gland. So, where did this universal pattern come from? Likely from careful observation, not just of the outer world, but of the inner world, through practices that modern language might call introspective science. Yogic meditation, Sufi contemplation, hermetic visualization, all seem to describe similar experiences linked to this singular organ. And if we reflect a little deeper on this idea that ancient traditions and modern science might be brushing against the same hidden truth, it's worth asking, how far back does this awareness really go? Is it isolated to one region or culture? Or is it a universal human thread? When we look across ancient civilizations, Egypt, India, Greece, even pre-Columbian America, certain symbols and architectural patterns repeat. Take the Eye of Horus from ancient Egypt. Scholars have noted that its shape closely mirrors the sagittal view of the human brain, particularly regions around the pineal gland and corpus callosum. Some see this as coincidence. Others argue it hints at an anatomical knowledge encoded in myth and symbol long before formal anatomy existed. In Vedic tradition, the Ajna chakra's location correlates not just to the pineal gland, but also with ideas of insight and foresight, abilities that transcend ordinary sense perception. Ancient texts like the Upanishads describe the inner light as a literal experience attainable through deep meditation. These aren't casual metaphors. Practitioners report perceiving visions, patterns of sacred geometry, and feelings of universal unity after years of disciplined inner focus. The Greeks had their own version of this. Philosophers like Plato wrote about the realm of forms, a dimension of perfect, immaterial archetypes. While not explicitly tied to biology, the concept echoes the same idea. There is a layer of existence hidden behind appearances, accessible through an awakened state of consciousness. The Delphic maxim, "Know thyself," wasn't just psychological advice. It implied peeling away layers of sensory illusion to uncover deeper truths. From a modern scientific perspective, these shared traditions seem strangely prescient. Neuroscientific research into neuroplasticity and altered states shows how activities like meditation, rhythmic breathing, and exposure to specific frequencies, like binaural beats, can physically rewire the brain structures, leading to measurable changes in areas tied to self-awareness, empathy, and sensory integration. For example, Dr. Andrew Newberg's research into neurotheology has shown that intense spiritual experiences produce distinct neurological signatures, most notably in the parietal lobe and regions adjacent to the pineal gland. Functional MRI scans reveal altered blood flow and connectivity during these states, indicating that spiritual experiences are not mere hallucinations, but involve profound shifts in brain activity. This ties into why so many modern belief systems and so-called New Age movements emphasize things like frequency, vibration, and energy alignment. Scientifically, we know that the brain operates across multiple frequency bands: delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma waves. Each corresponds to different states of consciousness. Our brain, as elusive as consciousness itself, operates through rhythms, oscillating waves that define not just our mental state, but in many ways our experience of reality. Science refers to these as brain waves, categorized across a spectrum from the slowest to the fastest, each carrying its own psychological and physiological signature. Yet this is not merely clinical data. Understanding these rhythms is essential if we are to grasp how altered states of awareness arise. Those same states often tied to what ancient traditions describe as awakening the third eye or accessing deeper layers of reality. At the foundation lie delta waves, the slowest and most profound. Delta predominates during deep, dreamless sleep, a state where the body undergoes its most essential processes of healing and regeneration. In these moments, consciousness becomes so still it almost vanishes from waking memory, and yet the body thrives. Moving upward in frequency, we encounter theta waves. Theta is often linked with the moments just before sleep, during meditation or in trance-like states. But it's not just relaxation. Theta is associated with vivid imagery, intuition, and sudden insights. It's during theta that many report accessing buried memories or receiving flashes of creative inspiration. From a metaphysical perspective, this frequency range is often equated with the threshold between the conscious and the subconscious, or even the bridge to higher consciousness itself. Above theta, there is alpha. Alpha waves occupy that familiar, calm yet alert mental space. Those moments where one feels relaxed, perhaps watching clouds drift or walking in nature, aware but untroubled. Historically, alpha was the first brainwave state observed scientifically, and it's tied closely to meditative clarity and a balanced mind. Then there's beta, the fast-paced frequency of active thought, analysis, focus. This is where most modern humans spend the majority of their waking hours, thinking, planning, stressing. Beta is necessary, yet prolonged dominance of this state, without returning to slower rhythms, is believed to contribute to anxiety and mental fatigue. At the upper end, gamma waves emerge, rapid, subtle oscillations linked to heightened perception, moments of pure insight, and, interestingly, observed at high levels in advanced meditators such as Tibetan monks during states of compassion and unity consciousness. Gamma is perhaps the scientific echo of what ancient texts describe as illumination, the mind fully awake, not just intellectually but spiritually. What's especially worth noting is that these aren't isolated states, but a dynamic interplay. Throughout the day and night, the brain naturally shifts between them. Yet, through intentional practices, meditation, sound frequency entrainment, breath control, one can learn to influence this balance, potentially accessing states associated with deeper awareness, or even what some traditions describe as awakening latent abilities tied to the pineal gland, the so-called seat of the soul. Advanced meditators, Tibetan monks for instance, show unusually high gamma wave activity. This suggests that deliberate practice can expand human consciousness beyond ordinary limits, perhaps even stimulating faculties linked to the so-called third eye. Now about the pineal gland's sensitivity to light. While in most vertebrates it acts as a direct photoreceptor, in humans it responds through a more complex pathway. Light enters the eyes, travels via the optic nerve to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, SCN, in the hypothalamus, and eventually signals the pineal gland to regulate melatonin. But here's what's intriguing. The pineal gland contains calcite microcrystals. Some researchers, like Dr. Sidney B., have hypothesized that these crystals could exhibit piezoelectric properties, meaning they can generate electrical charges in response to mechanical stress or electromagnetic fields. That raises fascinating possibilities. Could the pineal gland not only regulate sleep, but also function as a subtle antenna, responsive to environmental energies? It's speculative, but experiments in biophysics have shown that living tissues can be influenced by weak electromagnetic fields similar in strength to those produced naturally by the Earth or the human body's own biofields. Biofield science, while still on the fringe of mainstream acceptance, is gaining traction. Researchers like Dr. Beverly Rubik have studied human energy fields using devices such as gas discharge visualization, GDV cameras, which capture coronal discharges from living tissues, suggesting an interaction between body, mind, and surrounding energy patterns. The idea isn't entirely alien to ancient traditions. Across cultures, from Indian prana to Chinese qi, from the Egyptian ka to the Greek pneuma, there has always been a parallel understanding. The body is not merely flesh and bone, but also surrounded and infused by subtle energies that modern tools are only now beginning to detect. What's striking is how closely this mirrors practices like Reiki, Qigong, or even certain yogic kriyas. In each of these, practitioners describe channeling or cultivating energy through specific breath, movement, or visualization techniques. These aren't just metaphors for psychological states. Subjects undergoing such practices exhibit measurable changes, shifts in heart rate variability, skin conductance, and electromagnetic output measurable through sensitive devices like squid magnetometers. These instruments, originally developed to study the faint magnetic fields of the brain and heart, now find their place in exploring the boundary between physiology and what some might still call the spiritual. And it circles us back once again to the pineal gland, sitting quietly in the middle of this complex web. If the human system generates electromagnetic fields, and if the pineal gland contains crystals sensitive to such forces, could it serve as a bridge between the physical and energetic dimensions? Could this be part of why traditions place such emphasis on opening the third eye, not as a symbolic act, but as a real physiological and energetic phenomenon? When exploring further into historical texts, one finds references that are curiously specific. In the Taoist canon, the golden elixir said to arise from meditation isn't just philosophical musing. It describes subtle changes felt within the body, a tingling, a glow, a perceptible inner light. In Indian Kundalini Yoga, the rising of serpentine energy through the chakras is described as producing spontaneous bodily sensations, shifts in awareness, even visions of light and geometric patterns. Some neuroscientists now speculate that these reported experiences could be linked to activation in the brain's default mode network, a system involved in self-referential thought and mind-wandering, alongside changes in neurotransmitter activity. And here again, the pineal gland makes its quiet reappearance. It sits near the third ventricle of the brain, adjacent to cerebrospinal fluid pathways. Ancient alchemists, both in India and Europe, spoke of internal fluids, secretions, ambrosias, flowing from the brain in altered states. Could they have intuited subtle physiological processes long before microscopes existed? Modern theories suggest the pineal gland's melatonin production, and perhaps its involvement in producing DMT, could have effects not just on sleep, but on conscious experience itself. Dr. Rick Strassman's hypothesis around the spirit molecule suggests that under extreme conditions, birth, death, or deep meditation, the pineal gland might release this compound in ways that alter perception profoundly. But it isn't simply about neurotransmitters or electromagnetic fields, it's also about timing. Just as the pineal gland regulates circadian rhythms in response to light and dark, spiritual traditions emphasize specific times of day for practice. Pre-dawn hours, often called Brahma Muhurta in the Vedic tradition. This isn't just about cultural habit. Studies on chronobiology show that hormone cycles, neurotransmitter releases, and brainwave dominance shift predictably through the day and night, creating windows where altered states are more easily accessed. The early morning hours, when melatonin is still high and cortisol has yet to spike, create an optimal neurochemical environment for introspective states. Perhaps that's why sacred architecture around the world, from pyramids to temples, was often aligned with celestial events, not merely to mark time, but to synchronize human activity with cosmic rhythms, creating resonance between inner and outer worlds. The pineal gland, sensitive as it is to light and rhythm, stands as a biological mirror to this cosmic dance. What emerges from all this isn't a neat answer, but a layered mystery. The pineal gland, the third eye, altered states, ancient rituals, all of these point not to a single discovery or invention, but to a persistent cross-cultural attempt to decode human consciousness. From shamanic vision quests in the Amazon involving ayahuasca, a brew rich in DMT, to Christian mystics reporting divine illumination during states of prayer, the patterns repeat. And modern science, for all its precision, is still catching up. Functional MRI scans, EEG readings, neurotransmitter assays, they measure the echoes, not the thing itself. But taken together with ancient knowledge, a picture begins to form. One where the pineal gland isn't simply a relic organ left over from evolution, nor solely a regulator of sleep, but perhaps a doorway between matter and mind, between the known and the unknown. And it leaves us with a quiet but profound consideration. If such a doorway exists within us, waiting to be consciously opened, What does it say about the nature of reality itself? Are we truly observing the universe from the outside, or are we, through this small crystalline organ deep within, participating in its ongoing creation, perceiving not through eyes alone, but through the hidden vision shared across all of history's seekers and sages? In the end, whether one sees the pineal gland as a simple regulator of circadian rhythms or as a bridge to deeper states of consciousness, its presence invites reflection. Across biology, ancient wisdom, and modern science, there is a persistent echo that within the quiet architecture of the human brain lies something not yet fully understood. And perhaps, in continuing to explore both the measurable and the intangible aspects of our own inner worlds, we edge closer to understanding not just how we perceive reality, but how reality itself might unfold through us.